Hey everyone, this video is intended for people going into one of the AP Calculus courses, either A, B, or BC. Just telling you kind of an orientation into the calculator and how I would set up my calculator if I was going to use it in the calculus course. So the first thing I think that is most important is to get yourself a calculator that you are going to be using all year long. If you can check one out from the library, that's a great way to go. They have both CAS and non-CAS versions. You are allowed to use a CAS on the AP test. You're not allowed to use a CAS on the ACT, so that's kind of a decision you have to make for yourself. The CAS does have some extra advantages like the solve function, but most of the videos I'm going to be making here are going to involve solving things without a CAS and using a lot of graphing instead. But the point is, you want a calculator that's yours. You don't want to be scrambling to find a friend who you can borrow a calculator from the day of a test because you don't know what the settings are, you don't have time to get it how you want it to be. It might be a different model than you're used to. Basically, you want to have a calculator that's yours. So whether you buy one, you can get them online used. There are a lot of people that are selling them online. Or if you want to go get a new one, it's definitely a good investment. Or I'm guessing a lot of you from AP Stats or Advanced Algebra, you might already have one. But getting one from the library is really easy. Do it early in the year if you have to borrow one, because they do run out. And once they run out, you have to get your own or you have to borrow them from friends. And so I would suggest get a calculator early that you can become familiar with and use all the time. So the model I'm going to be using here is a CAS. Some of you have this straight CAS with the color screen. Some of you have the black one with kind of the tan and black buttons, white buttons on that one as well. That kind of bumps out at the top where the screen is. That calculator and this calculator operate very similarly. The buttons are going to all be in the same places if you get any kind of a calculator from the school. But if you get one of the gray calculators, the one that has little green buttons all over the place, that one is going to operate a little differently. So if you have that calculator, just talk to your teacher so you can figure out what's going on with that. So when you turn your calculator on, you see this screen, and I think a lot of students, because that calculate is automatically highlighted, they just go straight there. That is like the worst thing you can do. The scratch pad never saves settings. So every time you turn your calculator on, it's going to have different settings that they'll be reset to whatever the default is. And you don't want that, because if you're changing between radians and degrees and you don't have enough decimal places, it's a mess. I would never, ever, ever suggest that you use the scratch pad. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to make a new document. And one thing I'll say, me using a computer, it's really easy for me to use the mouse to get around. But on your calculators, I notice a lot of people like to just kind of scroll on the touchpad over here. I don't think that's the best way to get around. The arrow keys, I actually think are really nice because you're actually pushing something, you know you're moving around. So what I would suggest is just every time you use your calculator, get comfortable using the arrow keys as opposed to scrolling around. Another thing you can do, you'll notice pretty much every list that you're given has letters or numbers on next to the things that you want. So if we want to make a new document, you can just push the number 1 on your calculator, and that'll bring up a new document. If you want to use the calculate scratch pad, you could hit A. The stuff on the bottom you actually have to get to, so you could use the arrows, go down a little bit, and then you can scroll right and left. And that's to add different things to your document that's open. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to scroll over to New Document, or you can just click on it or hit the number 1, and we're going to make a new document. So I hit New Document, and you might have a different document open. If it's something that you know how to save, you might want to do that, but I'm just going to say no because it was nothing important for me. I'm going to add a calculator. Well, again, you could have hit the number 1 to add a calculator there. And the first thing we're going to do is we are actually going to save this document. So what you're going to do is hit Doc, D-O-C, over on the left here, and you're going to click on File. And under File, you're going to choose Save As. I think Save also works, but might as well use Save As. So again, if you want to practice using the arrow keys, use your arrow keys to get down to 5, or you can just hit the number 5. Either one of those will work. Now we're going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it Calc for calculus. So I'm just going to type C-A-L-C. Could have done that on my keyboard, but I want to show you just where the letters are over here. And you might call it Calc BC or Calc AB, depending on which course you're taking. And I'm just going to save it in my document. So what that's going to do is just basically put it at the very bottom of all the folders. If you want to put it in a folder, you can, but I always find that I forget which folder I put it in. And since I don't have very many documents, I'm just going to save it right in my documents where it opened up to. Now hit Save. And now at the top, it's going to say Calc. So that tells me I'm in this document named Calculus. And if you go to hit On again to get to your home screen, what we're going to do is if you click into Recent, this is always where it's going to be. I can do Recent, hit Calc, and that's going to open up the document that's open. It has a star next to it because that means that's the one that's open right now. If I have gone and done something else, I can go back into My Documents, and notice it's right at the bottom there, Calc. I can just click on it, and it's going to open it up to exactly where I was before. So now this is going to save any settings. It's going to save any work that I've done in this document. And so that's going to make it really easy to solve different problems and be able to use the settings over and over again. So speaking of the settings, let's set those right now. So what I'm going to do, each calculator is a little bit different. Basically, you want to play around with this a little bit, hit dock, and there's a setting you'll notice I have on here. Some people you have to hit menu, and the settings will be at the bottom here. But I'm going to just play around until you figure out the exact spot they are, but all of us are going to use the same settings. So I'm going to, on mine, I hit dock, and then I'm just going to use the arrows. So I'm going to go down to 7, and then I'm going to hit the right arrow to open up that menu, and I'm going to go to document settings. So for some of you, there's another menu here that says like general settings and graph settings. We'll talk about the graph settings in a second, but right now with that document settings, number 2, that display digits should say float. If you have any number next to it, that's going to cut off the number of digits that are shown. So like if you do float 4, it's only going to give you 4 decimal places every time. The AP test requires 3 decimal places, but the more you have, the better. So you definitely want that display digits to just be on float, nothing else there. The angle, you definitely want to be radians. Everything we do in calculus is in radians. There is nothing in degrees. So this is, I think, especially important for students who are taking like physics at the same time as calculus. Because in physics, you always use degrees. In calculus, we always use radians, so you might want to set up a separate document for physics that's always set to go as well. Everything else should be just fine as the defaults. You want normal, you want real, auto, rectangular, all of that is just fine. You definitely SI units and decimal base. So yeah, if you change this to like binary or hex, you're going to be in big trouble. All the rest of it should be fine. Just float and radian are the really important ones. You might choose make default. That means every time you make a new document, this is where it will be. I'm just going to click OK, because if I have like a physics document or something, I don't necessarily always want to be in this. So I'm just going to click OK on that. And now, just a way to kind of check, if you do 7 divided by 22 maybe, and you hit enter, it should give you a fraction. If you do 7 divided by 22 and then you hit control, enter, it should give you a fraction, and it should be lots of decimal places. So that's just a good way to check to make sure that you have everything in the right form. So now we're going to try something with a graph. So what I'm going to do to add a graph is I'm going to hit the on to get to the home screen. And I'm going to use my arrows to go down, and I'm going to select add graph. You could add another calculator, you got a graph, there's all kinds of stuff that you use here. I use the spreadsheets a lot in stats and the data in stats as well. I'm going to use that add graphs. Now notice when I open that, right at the top here, there are 2 tabs open. You can scroll between those. If you use your touchpad, you can get your arrow up, you can click on the other one, and it's still going to have that 720 seconds that we did before. So it's a nice way to be able to get between different things that you're using at the same time. You can also, if you hit control, notice on the left and right, they have little blue pages. If you hit control left, it's going to open up that, it's going to move across tabs basically. So let's just add it. Let's open up a few more tabs here. Let's just kind of see how this system works. So just add a bunch of things that you probably don't use very often. And so now you'll notice we have 4 things open. So if I use that control left and control right, it's going to scroll between those tabs, just like you would use like on a web browser or something. And what a lot of people often tell me before we get into kind of how the graphing is going to work here, is they say, well, okay, but I have like 33 tabs open now. And sometimes that happens on the internet too, right? But what you can do is there's actually a quick way to see all your tabs that are open. Notice, so the left, right, up, and down kind of all has those navigation blue things next to them. If you do control up, it opens up all of your tabs. You can use your arrows to get between them. So you can choose the one that you want and you can hit enter, that would open it. Or a really handy thing is if you choose one that you don't want and you hit just backspace or delete, it's going to get rid of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of those 3 that I added because I don't want them right now. So I'm going to delete that one, I'm going to delete that one. And I want to go to my graph, so I'm going to hit enter on the graph and it'll open it up. So on the graphs window, this is one spot where often they won't give you as many decimal places as you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph, I don't know, let's graph x squared minus 3. So I'm going to graph x squared caret 2. Get out of it, hit the right arrow. Remember I talked about how I love those arrows. Then it'll do minus 3 because that'll give us some funky roots. Now I hit enter, it's going to graph it for me. And now what I want to do, let's say I want to find the zeros. So you guys probably have experience with this, I hope so. We're going to go menu, analyze graph, 0, which is the first thing there. And this is one spot where you actually do have to, you can use the arrows. If you use left and right, right now I'm using the arrows to go back and forth. I think this is one spot where the trackpad actually might be a little bit nicer, but if you hold it, it goes kind of fast. So as for lower bounds, I do something on the left and then I hit enter. And then as for an upper bound, so I'm going to scroll through that 0, right about to here, and hit enter again. Now, for some of you, you might have gotten as many decimal places as I did. For some of you, you might only gotten like 2 decimal places or 3. This is one spot where you really, really want to make sure you have lots of decimal places, because in calculus we use a lot of zeros and intersection points and maximums and minimums. Very important to have lots of decimal places there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to, I believe in this calculator it's menu, and then on number 9 there you see I have settings. For some of you, remember when we said doc and you went to settings and status, you had a graph settings there. So if that was your case, just whatever you do, you want to somehow get to the graph settings. So I'm going to go menu. I'm going to go to the bottom where it says settings, number 9. And now, once again, you want to make sure that display digits is on float. Now, because the reason that mine's already there is because that's my default. My default whenever I make a new document is that it's going to float. Make sure your graphing angle is radians. The geometry angle we will never use in calculus, but it should be on degree. If you ever use like the geometry sketchpad, it's going to use degrees then for the angles inside of polygons and stuff. That's what you want. So float and radians, both on the main calculator window and on the graph. Those are the big things. So I'm going to hit OK, so it saves that. And right after you hit OK, it should add as many decimal places as they can put on that x coordinate for the 0 right there. Cool. Now, one other trick I want to show you as long as we're here, if you want to add a second graph to this, you hit the tab key. The tab key is right over here on the left above control. And notice now it says F2x. Maybe I want to graph like x plus 1. Okay, now I hit enter, it's going to graph in that second line. And whenever you hit tab, you can use the up and down arrows to go through your different equations. And notice that if you have a color screen, it tells you what color it is. It kind of highlights around the check sign. And you can scroll through, you can turn them on and off. So like if I don't want to show this one anymore, I'll just click that little arrow and it'll turn off the graph. I can click it, turn it back on. And you can also delete them, you can change them, whatever you want to do. So this is kind of a nice little way. I think also if you click this, I think it'll show you all of them. Nope, it just lets you kind of scroll between them. So it's kind of like your phone, right? Like you guys, I've noticed if you ever want to figure something out on your phone, you're really good at just sliding around and changing things. You should feel the same comfort with your calculator. You should be able to just like kind of look at it and mess around with the keys and eventually be able to figure out what you want. So I just encourage you to kind of get comfortable with this, playing around and seeing what you want to do. So now, maybe you do a new document. I'm going to save my changes. Sorry, I should have shown you that before. So I'm actually going to go back into my document. Sorry, I should have done that so fast. Go back into my calc document. And notice everything is still here, right? Everything I did is still here. That's the great thing about this. I'm going to go to Doc, and I'm just going to do File, Save. And that's going to save all of the settings that I have set up right now, and then you will never have to change those settings again as long as you use this calc document. So hopefully this was helpful in setting up your calculator. It is so important that we know how to use these machines next year for calculus, or this year if you're watching this at the beginning of the year. And so please take the time to set up these settings and just get to know your calculator. Use the same calculator all the time, and you'll never go wrong. If you have any questions, feel free to ask your teacher. All right, good luck with your calculators, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.